What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I am so excited to have my guest of honor today, Jeremy Indika, who I actually met from a former guest, Ryan Gadsby, on Instagram, and just an absolutely incredible story that I'm really excited to share with you guys today. We're going to get into his story, but how's it going, Jeremy? Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yeah, it's going really well. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, of course. It's so funny, just the time differences. It's interesting. I've got to connect with people from New Zealand, and you're the third person now. Wait, fourth, because I did Zara with Caterpillar Freedom. She's an activist out in the UK. So I've actually had four people from the UK over here in America on this platform. So I'm really excited about it.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
yeah, so I want to get right into your story because when I found your content, Ryan had sent me over some content and said, hey, I know there's not a lot of men speaking out on abuse, which is what we're doing here. For those of you who are kind of just joining, I'm doing a survivor series on my podcast and featuring survivor stories from all walks of life. And if you look at all my stories historically, there is no one type of person that experiences abuse. And a lot of these stories are very relatable to people. And we really do need more men speaking up on this. So when I had found your content, there was a couple of videos that really stuck out. The first one was the This Is My Story animation video. And then you had I Knocked on My Abuser's Door. And your story, it's almost gripping to where it leaves you on the edge of your seat, and you're very poetic with how you tell it. So I'd love if you could give us a little background on you and kind of maybe start at the beginning, and we'll work our way to where you are today. But I'd love for you to share some of your story because I think it's so inspiring for other people to see somebody as strong as you and to understand what you went through to get to where you're at.
Yeah, so it's so great that you mentioned those two projects. They're like my bigger projects of raising awareness. They're like more final videos. So I'm so glad that you mentioned those. To start off, really, if we just start my story from the start, I'm a sexual abuse survivor, child sexual abuse survivor. And this sexual abuse happened when I was 8 years old and went on for a number of years. It was a trusted member of the family. It was somebody who was looking after me while my parents were at work. So he had access to me. And what he managed to do was very cleverly groom me into believing that he was my friend.
And
And once
explain
he
for people who aren't familiar, what exactly is grooming for somebody who that terminology might be a little bit new to?
It's a great question. It's a great question, and actually, I'm glad you stopped me there because it's something we are not actually talking enough about. I would say a summary of grooming is successfully manipulating and influencing a child to do what you want, what you desire, and the child is often buying into what they're being told because they know no different. And that's where these adults who have this sexual desire towards children are managing to manipulate and influence them into doing these sexual things. And that's what he managed to do to me very successfully. I knew that it was a secret and I wasn't to tell anybody. And I knew that it was a special thing that me and him did together. So it kind of had its own secrecy built into it. And this went on for a number of years, and then it stopped. And I returned back to my normal life. I was just a normal kid. I had good friends. I was doing well at school. And it was almost as if I'd managed to pack what happened tightly into a box and just put it to the back of my mind. Let's say I was around 9 years old by this point. And the memories of this abuse just lay dormant in the back of my head, and I continued my life. I grew into a young man. I had a career as a mechanical design engineer. I was flourishing in that career. I was working in the aerospace industry and the automotive industry. I had great friends. I was doing really well. And then it was in my mid-20s that things started to change. The memories of the abuse came back. They started to haunt me. It was like I couldn't get rid of them. And I decided that I needed to do something about this because it was really causing me a lot of trouble. Now, if you think at 25 years old, it is 15 years after the abuse had happened. It had laid dormant at the back of my mind for 15 years. It's a tricky thing for people to get their head around. It's difficult to understand. Why did it lay dormant in the back of your mind? Why didn't you say anything earlier? Was it that you forgot about it? A lot of people do subconsciously forget about it. But for me, I'd never forgotten about it. I just didn't care about it, right? I would just go about my life, and things would remind me of it. Maybe something would come up on the news, or somebody would say something in conversation that would spark a quick memory. But I was having my life was going great that I just didn't care about it. But that changed when I was in my mid-20s, and the memories started to become darker, and I started to realize actually how terrible what had happened to me was.
Was that kind of your first realization that it was wrong? I feel like survivors, you're so young whenever that happens, and you put it really beautifully in the This Is My Story video, where you said, you were my friend and I trusted you, and I knew what you were doing wasn't making me feel good, but I knew that it made you feel good, so I did it for you, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't have that cognition growing up when you're going through something that young, that this is wrong and I need to put a stop to it now. But I feel like there's always a point in a survivor's story where they had some type of a aha moment that said, oh my gosh, I just realized that this was wrong. What happened to me? Did you experience that? Was that in your 20s, or was there any time before that period that you had that realization and started to think about it in a different way than you had?
I think I really started realizing that what had happened in the past was wrong when I started growing of an age of sexual nature myself. So early teens.
Okay.
And then my life started I started developing as a human being, as a person, biologically, into puberty, and then understanding more about sex and desiring sex in its natural, my body was taking its natural process. And then when I started engaging in that activity, then that's when I started realizing that what had happened in the past was wrong. But again, I just didn't care. I was very clever, or it was very easy for me just to block it out. What 15-year-old, 20-year-old, 25, early 20s, you don't want to be dealing with that. You're having a good time with your friends. And another point about the children not understanding what they're involved in is wrong. I've got a lot to say about that, which I'm sure we'll touch on as the conversation goes on. I think part of the reason, I know part of the reason for that is because we're not educating them on these things, right? So I was a naive child because I didn't know about private areas. I didn't know the rules around them. I didn't know about that there are to be no secrets. I didn't know what to do if somebody asked me to touch them in their private area. None of this was being talked about. It was the 80s, and as I mentioned in that animation video, I still don't think we're having enough conversations now. Yeah, and it's 2021. So he had me hook, line, and sinker. He had me wrapped around his little finger. He had me exactly where he wanted me. And it was, I think, when the memories come in, when the memories started haunting me mid-20s, I think the feeling of sadness for that boy that I was one of the big things, because you think about an 8-year-old and they're so innocent. They have never done a thing wrong. The only things they've ever done wrong is something that they've copied from what they've seen, but truly their essence is true innocence. And to be misleaded and manipulated into doing something that's so horrific, it's quite difficult to get your head around. I tried to deal with those memories for I'm going to say 2 years, where I thought what I could do was just put them to the back of my mind. And I tried that and I tried that, but it just didn't work. They kept returning back more and more over time. And I realized that it just wasn't working. So that's when I told somebody for the first time.
Who was that person that you told?
So it was a close friend of mine. He was actually friends with me when I was the age that it was going on. And he just literally couldn't believe what I was saying. He literally was so shocked and so angry and so sad, but he supported me. And that was the main thing. That was the main thing that I needed. Just somebody to listen, you know? And one of the incredible things that came from that conversation was I remember waking up the next day and thinking to myself, wow, that felt really good. That felt really good to just say it out loud and to say it to somebody that I knew. And actually, it kind of made me feel confident about the situation. It gave me a real sense of encouragement. And that's
you were
when
shamed into being silenced. So when you're shamed, you feel shame to even talk about it because you feel that everybody around you will also shame you for it, right? When you don't realize that you were such a young kid and that wasn't your fault, but you
yes.
have it built in your brain subconsciously that if you tell, something bad's going to happen, and you almost put it on you that it was your fault because you didn't stop it. But again, you don't realize that until you have the cognizance of, oh, well, if it happened now in my life, I would stop it. But back then I didn't have that. I didn't have that realization. I didn't have that knowledge that that's something that I had the power to do at that age.
And also, I think for me in particular, and as I've written more online about this, a lot of people have come and said, yeah, they felt the same. And that is, there is a feeling of embarrassment that comes with this because you've done something that a child should never do. You've been involved in a situation that a child should never be in. You got manipulated. You got taken for a fool in some ways. You got tricked into doing something so disgusting, but you were doing it. And we all know that it's not the fault of the child. We all know the child actually has nothing to do with it. It's all the adult. But growing up, there is a feeling of embarrassment, especially being a heterosexual male and having been involved in male on male activity. So I think for me, there is shame in it, you know, there is sadness, and there is this fear of telling other people because of what they may think. But for me, one of the biggest ones was embarrassment.
Understandably. I think too, society puts a lot of pressure on men to be, I guess it could go either way, either super masculine or kind of the opposite. And there's not really that in between where it's acceptable. It's not considered manly necessarily in society to be vulnerable, right? And so you see women survivors struggle to come forward and talk about this, and we don't have the same societal pressure to not talk about emotional things. I think in society it's more expected from women, but it leaves out half the population is men. And there's a massive portion of abuse victims that are children that are boys, and they live their whole lives carrying that inside of them in that box that you talked about, and just throwing it to the back and saying, I'm just not ever going to tell anybody. And some of them never do. They get married or they go through life and they take it to their grave with them and never talk about it. What gave you
Absolutely.
the courage to actually talk about it? And especially having that be so fresh to where you're experiencing the memories, and it is emotional. What gave you the courage to go tell a friend about it, especially somebody that could potentially judge you if they've known you for that long? You had a lot to lose with telling a friend that you had known since that age.
Absolutely. It was because it was like I had nowhere else to run to. You know, I tried to ignore the memories. I tried to let them disappear. I tried, you know, thinking about different things. I tried talking to myself about it. It was like I tried everything that I could. So it was like the next option that I had. It was like out of desperation that I spoke to somebody more than anything else. It was a surprise. The aftermath, the confidence and encouragement that it gave me was actually a surprise. I didn't think I didn't even think about what would happen once I spoke about it. But it was a welcomed reaction inside of me once I'd done it. And so yeah, the speaking out thing, it was just a reach of desperation, really. because I wasn't sure what else I could do. And it was the best move I ever made.
And man, you have just continued speaking out. So kind of fast forward to now, you have really modeled an entire social media platform off of your story, which I can imagine if it was that scary to go tell a friend that you've known for a long time, and it was something that you held inside for so many years. How did you end up deciding to put this out, not just for a close friend to hear, but to complete strangers?
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride. It really has. And it was that feeling of encouragement that I got speaking out the first time encouraged me to speak out again some months later, and then again some months later. And then as I started seeing the pattern that every time I spoke about it, it was like more release, more power, more strength. I was like, oh, this feels good. Hang on a minute. If I've told those 3 closest friends, maybe I could tell their partners. Oh, actually, I haven't told these people yet. I haven't told these people yet. I haven't told these people yet, until everybody that knew me knew. And don't get me wrong, this did not happen overnight. This was over a 2 or 3 year span. But the frequency of people I was telling was coming sooner and sooner and sooner. The frequency was increasing. That included with, I started to go online and read chat rooms and see other people speaking. I was like, there's lots of people doing this. It just felt like such a powerful movement. The more I spoke, the more confident I got about with my story, the more I understood that nobody judging these stories. The only reaction that you get from telling somebody your story of child sexual abuse is sadness, and that they wish they could undo it. Now, don't get me, I fully understand there will be the odd person that doesn't give that reaction. I completely get that. But for the most part, people are so supportive. They understand how much bravery that takes to speak out. And all of this was just helping me, was building me. And now we end up to where we are. You know, I started speaking in public in London on stages, and this is at open mic stages, small audiences, because I knew that what I should do is go public with my story. I had gained so much confidence from talking to my friends. And what one of my missions is, we just talked a little bit about masculinity, and it's not manly to do certain things. Well, what I want to try my best to create is for this to be manly to speak about. Yeah, what I want men who have gone through something like this, that have been wanting to say something for years, to see that actually it's the most manly thing that you can do, saying something like this. Pure strength, pure power. You're owning your story. You're taking control of it. There's nothing more manly than that for me.
I couldn't agree more. What is more powerful than that courage to do something that nobody else will do and to face your absolute worst fear?
Yeah.
That is absolutely stepping in your power. And I feel too, we don't realize sometimes when we hold something in, we internalize it and think, gosh, I'm the only one that I know that has gone through this. How are people going to react to it? But we find quite the opposite when we talk to people and we share our struggles. And a lot of people are like, gosh, I'm so glad you said that, because this happened to me whenever I was younger. It's not the same as you, but man, I went through this really hard time too. And I haven't really told anybody about it. And I feel like these are the stories that actually connect us, right? It's not always the best time in our life, even though having a great success or having an achievement or winning an award or being recognized, all those things are so great, but would they be as great if there wasn't that struggle behind it, right? But we don't
Yeah.
talk about that struggle to get to that place. And
Yeah.
a lot of people could look at you and where you're at and say, oh my gosh, if they say that they watch one of your videos and turn the volume down, they would see this confident man standing in his power, talking really confidently and powerfully about a story. And then you turn the volume up and you realize, oh my gosh, he's not talking about making $1 million or buying his yacht or driving his Ferrari, right? You're talking about the worst thing that's ever happened to you in your life. And that gives
Yes.
so much confidence to other people who see you and to say, why aren't we talking about this more? Why isn't this
Absolutely.
more normal? We all go through struggles, but for whatever reason, we think that we're supposed to internalize them. And in turn, it makes us feel like we're the only ones that went through it. When in fact, there's so many stories, not necessarily the same as yours, but a lot of us have gone through something that we're carrying inside and we feel that we're the only ones. And when you actually come out and talk about it, you realize too, and you probably had this realization that I'm not alone. There's a lot of people who have gone through this. And the more we talk about it, the more I realize that this is the common denominator between what connects us to people. I'm not the weirdo that experienced this. I'm not the one that should be shamed and to be embarrassed. This is something that a lot of people go through in their life.
Yes, absolutely. And they say, don't they, a problem shared is a problem halved. And they also say that there's the strength is in your vulnerability. And not only can you, if you do speak to somebody about anything that happened in your childhood that makes you feel sad, not only does it give you some release, but generally you're always inspiring somebody, you know, which is, it's like a win-win situation. I also do say that what I stay away from is advising people to speak out. I don't think that would be correct for me to do that. I can tell you that I got a lot of benefit from doing that, but take things at your own pace, but always do consider this as an option. I think that's better advice.
Well, it's like how you said, it took you so many years to finally have
Yeah.
that confidence. But I think just realizing that these stories exist and making these types of stories more mainstream instead of just the perfection, the perfect Instagram post stories and the success stories of entrepreneurs making $1 million. That's a 1 in a million type story that those things happen. And nobody leads that perfect life that you see on Instagram. And I really love seeing influencers like you and advocates and activists coming up and saying, okay, I have a goal that I want to be successful with what I'm doing, but I'm going to take you through the struggle to get there. And I'm going to let you know from point A to point B how I got there. And I'm going to show you all the ugly parts of the story, because that is what ultimately leads to the success point that you're looking to get, which is to help other people not have to go through what you went through and then to bring that awareness. So the thing with your story that I love is it doesn't just stop with, okay, I'm just going to tell a few people my story, I'm going to go talk, and that's it. You actually created these amazing video concepts. They're like mini movies on your pages.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what inspired you to take that approach and kind of your goal behind your social media presence and what you're looking to bring to the table, because it's very different than what other people are doing.
Oh, I'm so glad you say that. It's so encouraging. So my idea that I've got in my head is, if I can do my best to try to make this topic interesting and engaging for the viewer, then it's going to create more attention around it, which is absolutely necessary if we're going to get anywhere with raising awareness. Because I also feel it's equally, it's just so important to also get the attention of people who do not have a direct link to this topic, as well as, of course, the survivors or the people that work in areas that deal with this. It's like everybody's concerned. So I thought to myself, how can I make it interesting and engaging for the viewer so that it doesn't matter what background you're from, you're going to be interested in what the video is about. So I did a lot of research on story, how to tell a story, and how to write. And I just started getting connected with more and more people. And one thing led to another. You know, Instagram is great for that. You can just approach anybody. And I just started collaborating with other artists. So videographers, filmmakers, script writers, animation companies, and we just started working together. Now, mostly the content that I've got on there on my YouTube channel is my story told in different ways. But I'm also now trying to branch out to other areas such as education with children, survivor support, how are we going to handle this? And that is what the animation kind of touched at as it gets into the end, is suggesting that we need to educate children more. One of my goals is to create a program on TV or YouTube that's very successful, that gets everybody talking. We need to have more conversations about this. The example I like to use is there was a Netflix series called The Queen's Gambit. And that was about chess, an old-fashioned dying out game. But the story was so gripping. Of course, it had many sideline stories within it, but the story was so gripping that it just brought chess back to the limelight. And we know that because Google and eBay and Amazon reported their highest number of chessboards sold in decades. And they said and eBay said most of their suppliers run out. Now, what to me that says is, if you can create a gripping enough story, people will watch it and get interested in the topics within that story, even if they were never interested. I mean, who even plays chess these days? You know, the game is finished almost. But it just reignited it, and people got interested in it. People wanted to play it. People wanted to know more about it. Now, why can't a gripping story be created around this topic that people then all of a sudden want to know more? They start to become aware. They talk to their sister about it. They talk to their neighbor about it. Did you watch that story? Oh my God, this was interesting. This was interesting. This was terrible. So I just think it's possible. I really do. And that's kind of my aim. That's where I'm trying to get to. I'm trying to create engaging content.
I think you're doing it. When I had first saw your page, I didn't really know what to expect, but I did not expect the type of content that you were putting out. And I'd love for you to kind of talk about some of it. But essentially, you have been taking these risks to confront your abuser, if only for the purpose of getting it out of your body, what he did, and being able to look him in the eye and say it. And you're taking viewers on this journey with you in these almost little mini movies. And the one that I was saying earlier, I knocked on my abuser's door. I would love for you to talk about the inspiration behind why you decided that that was something that you wanted to do, and then the video. But this video, it had me at the edge of my seat. I'm watching and thinking, oh my gosh, the courage it is taking him to do that. And then to create this video concept around it. And your voice was so powerful talking about it. I'd love for you to walk viewers. The abuse happened whenever you were young, but you're taking active action now to, I almost want to say, put action behind your words and say, I'm not going to let somebody silence me. I'm not going to let them forget what they did. And I'm going to get justice one way or another. And I think it's just incredible. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you've done from coming out and starting to talk about it to now just having gone to court.
Yeah, so it's a crazy story, right? I mean, even when I talk about it now, I still think, how the hell did we end up in the situation that I ended up in last week? So just for those listening that have not heard my story before, as I spoke about it more in public on the stages in London, one of the questions I had in my mind was, I wonder if he's still doing this to more children. Where is he now? What the hell is he doing? What the hell is he up to? So I decided after some time that I should try to find out. So I tried to find him online, and I managed to find him indirectly. I sent a few messages and I was blocked. So I reported the crime to the police, the abuse that he did to me, to the police. The case lasted for 9 months, but was closed because of a lack of evidence. It happened in the 80s. There's no evidence. I appealed it. The appeal was rejected. I sat on it for a little while, but I was so angry that he denied it that I thought, right, he should face me. So I continued searching for him. I managed to find out where he lives, and I went and knocked on his door. The interaction at the door when he answered was the most craziest situation I've ever been in. Crazy because he went to slam the door shut. I got my foot in front of the door and managed to hold it open. And I told him everything that I think. I told him everything that I remember. And I asked him why he was teaching me to do those things. Who the hell did he think he is doing those things, etc. He calls the police while I'm at the door, and I get arrested that night and put in a cell. He decides to prosecute me for assault, for pushing the door into him, stalking for finding out where he lives, and harassment for not leaving him alone. He successfully takes me to court, which is ironic because I couldn't take him to court. And I go to court 3 times. I plead not guilty. And last week was the final trial. It was one hell of an ordeal. But the morning started with talks of me going to prison for 6 months. But the day ended with the judge giving me a slap on the wrist and telling me to go on my way. And the reason why the day changed like that is because it was like everybody in that courtroom started to see that what I was saying was true. So at the start, it looked like I was some criminal who's gone to this man's house, wanting a fight, which was not the case. And I just wanted the conversation, and that's what I said in court. And the day ended with everybody basically being like, yeah, you know, he wouldn't go to these lengths if he wasn't telling the truth. And I stood in the witness box and gave my testimony with confidence. I felt confident about it. And that court case is now over. I did get a fine of £1,000. And yes, we are upset about that, but it's so much better than 6 months prison sentence. And also they had to actually give me something because it's antisocial behavior. They couldn't just let me go free. He did request for compensation and they rejected him. So for me, that says a lot. And also I got a restriction order against him, which was, you know, I was completely expecting that. But that whole situation is now over. To think that the man that sexually abused me when I was a child took me to court for knocking on his door is crazy. And that's why I made videos about it, because I wanted to explain how wrong these child abuse cases are being handled. And I told it as it was. I just told it in story form. So if anybody goes to my social media platforms or my YouTube, when you scroll down all my posts, you will actually get a story. And that's my story, and it's up to date. I really went to his door for a number of reasons. I understand that I'm not going to be able to prosecute him because I just don't have the evidence, and there's nobody else speaking out against him. So I went to the door for a few reasons. I wanted to let him know that what he did was devastating and horrific. And if he's still doing it to more children, he should stop, because it is devastating their lives. But also, things are changing now. Survivors are stronger than ever now. The internet has given everybody a voice. They will come knocking at his door as well. The younger generations are stronger than ever. And I think the internet has a large part to play for that. You know, they're very outspoken these days. So if he's still doing it to more children, he should watch out and stop. And I just needed to let him know that what he did will never be forgotten. Will never be forgotten.
So powerful. I was in tears watching some of these videos while sitting at the edge of my seat, because you do a great job of, you talk about it from your perspective now as an adult, but you do it through the eyes of a child at the same time. You can put yourself in your shoes at that young age, and it really brings this emotional side to it that people can interact with, even if they've never gone through something like that. And it touches you in the heart, and it makes you think, what if that happened to me? What would I want somebody to do? And what would I want the outcome to be of these situations? And wouldn't I want justice for what I went through? And it makes you think, like, why aren't we talking about this more? Kids don't have a voice. They can't come out. A kid can't take a guy like that to court whenever you're 8 years old, right? You never had a chance to have a fair trial with him, and that's so sad, especially because you don't know as a kid either to take video or to try to find evidence to prove that something happened, right? So I really do think that it's an unfair advantage that abusers have on top of the grooming and the fear tactics that they put into victims. Now, one of your other
Yes,
videos that really struck me that I was also indulging in was, are pedophiles born with this evil in them? And that
excellent.
is a very interesting topic because I think it's really easy in our minds to automatically villainize and demonize abusers, which we should. What they're doing is wrong, but the conversation just isn't there, period, about how did that person get to where they're at? Are they born a pedophile and it's a brain chemistry thing? Or is there something that can happen in somebody's life to push them in that direction that we need to be actively talking about to make sure that parents are aware of what to do and what not to do with their child, or to be aware of what they're being exposed to? And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that too, because I think that it's a topic we don't talk about. And it's interesting seeing it come from a survivor, somebody that could just villainize abusers, and you're doing the opposite. You're trying to humanize them.
Yeah, so it's excellent that you've asked me this, because you're the first person that's gone into a video that I've made that's not just my story. So thank you for that. And that's just such an interesting question for me. Are paedophiles born with this evil in them, or did something in their life make them this way? Now, we can be angry forever at these people for doing what they are doing, right? And rightly so. But we also need to have a look at what the hell is going on and try to understand why these things are being done, what is causing these things to be done, because we're trying to prevent for the future. And for anybody that thinks that discussion is not necessary, the children are relying on us to have these discussions. They need us as adults to sort this situation out. Every 5-year-old, every 8-year-old, every 12-year-old is relying on us to sort out this mess. And I believe that this is the type of question that we need to start discussing. Now, it's a very tough question. I mean, that's why I made a video about it. And what I did was I just chatted, I think, for 20 minutes, giving my opinion, hoping that that would create some conversation. Because if we're going to say that children are born with this evil in them, then we have to look at babies, toddlers, young children, and say that there's going to be a percentage of them that have this lying in their brain dormant that's going to become active at some point. What is that? If that's the case, is that a misfiring? Is that a genetic defect? Is that something that's gone wrong in the brain? But some people believe that nobody's born like that. By the way, I don't have the answer. I'm in both camps. The other side of this discussion is, did something in their life make them this way? And a lot of people will say probably that's the case. Probably it was that they were abused themselves. But I do always give my comment on that. Not everybody that abuses goes on to abuse. We mustn't generalize that. And so if some pedophiles are abusing children that were not abused themselves, then what is it that actually is making them like that? You know, I think there's a misconception. I think a lot of people think that, you know, all pedophiles have been attacking children for years, or they're all evil, they're all terrible people. They are evil and terrible people, but I think there's many millions that have this in their head that have never acted on it. I think there are millions that are upstanding citizens of our society, but do this behind closed doors. They're not this evil, scary predator behind a TV screen with no friends. We need to get rid of that. The man that did this to me was 25 years old and he was a nurse, right? So we just need to open the conversation. We need to try to understand what the hell is going on, what is causing people to do this, why are people doing this? Because the more we understand it, the better chance we have of addressing it.
And I think too, learning what grooming is and understanding that, learning what pedophiles do to entrap children and to build that trust with them to be able to get away with these acts. I think the psychology of that, as well as the psychology of what a survivor goes through, because that's the other thing. Your abuse ended at 9 years old, but you're being abused in some way because you're reliving it. You're the effects of that stick with you for the rest of your life, right? The abuse doesn't end even when it ends. And I think too that that's grossly misunder talked about, and misunderstood, is what abusers are going through in their mind and the psychology behind that, but also how do we help survivors once they're free of the abuse, the actual physical abuse or mental or sexual? Because what you guys go through for the rest of your life, and you've talked about this in videos too, it's impacted intimacy and relationships with you. You had another video where you're talking to a crowd and you brought up a really good question. And when I started watching it, I was thinking, what is he getting at with this? But you said, what's something that you do that you know you shouldn't do? And you had
Yeah,
people raise their hand and somebody said lying,
yeah.
right? You brought up, that was a really good way to relate it. We all do stuff that we know we shouldn't. And the question is why? Because the little things that we might do day to day, like a little white lie here and there, or, we arrive to work late and we give an excuse why. Do pedophiles go through that same thing where to them it's just kind of this nervous tick almost that they do it, but it's not emotional baggage that they carry? It's just kind of a little white lie for them? Or is it something greater than that?
Yes. So it starts getting
So
it just starts
powerful.
getting interesting in a way, have they got this thing in them that they're trying to resist, but they don't resist it? Are there a number of them that have never touched a child but use child porn instead? Are there a number of them that wish they could manage the temptation, but it gets the better of them all the time? Are there a number of them that want professional help, but they can't go and get professional help because as soon as they do, and I'm talking about non-offending pedophiles, sorry, I'm talking about people who have this attraction, but I've never acted on it before. Talking about them. If you've committed the crime, you're not in this discussion. But if you've never committed the crime and you want professional help to help you manage this as you go along your life, nobody can go anywhere because you can't admit to it. So actually all we're doing is keeping them in their home, suppressing them, and they're trying to deal with it themselves and they can't because it's a sexual desire that keeps getting the better of them. But I just want to switch the conversation to something you mentioned because I don't want us to not comment on it. And that is, yes, we do need to understand what is going on in a paedophile's mind better so we can try to prevent this in the future. But yeah, we do also need to find better ways, more ways of managing the aftermath of being of sexual abuse, right? Because it's not, I don't think it's good enough to just accept that it's going to be sadness and devastation for the rest of your life. I don't think it's good enough that we haven't got a variety of ways. Everybody is always asking me, are you going through therapy? That is the question that everybody asks. And my answer is no, and people don't like it. But my answer is no, because there are a variety of ways to handle this. And therapy doesn't work for everybody. And, we need to get better at how we are going to manage these things. How are we going to manage it when sadness starts becoming overpowering? Frustration becomes overpowering. Anger that it happened to you becomes overpowering. How are we going to manage it so we don't act on those emotions and take it out on other people? Like the life of a survivor after the abuse is a challenging one. So I think there's so much work to be done.
There is. And one of the points that you brought up in that video also, are pedophiles born with this evil in them, is you bring up also, do pedophiles, are they, I want to quote you correctly. You say something along the lines of, are they, how is it that you put this? Are they kind of inherently like this? And is this a guilt that they carry too? And is this something that we can treat, right? Because a lot of times we tend to repeat the patterns that we go through in life. A lot of abusers abuse after they've
Yeah,
been abused, right?
yeah,
And you had said, why would they do something that hurt them so much as a child, right? And so
yes,
also, how do we offer support for abused children? That way we can help maybe lead them and guide them in a different direction to where they're not reliving those same patterns and putting them on somebody else. And we're helping them understand what they went through. So that way they can break that generational or kind of that pedophile
yeah.
uh, pattern that they've lived through and learn how to live healthily in their life and to not expose other people to that abuse.
So I would love to speak with psychologists and neurologists to find out why is somebody carrying out what hurt them the most as a child to more children. And we haven't just got to look at pedophilia for this. How many people, I think everybody's guilty of it to some level, do the thing that their parents did to them that used to annoy them when they were a child, and they find themselves doing it to their child, and they're like, oh my God, I'm just like my mum. Oh my God, I'm just like my dad. And that's the thing that annoyed them the most, right? I know that's a different topic, but I just wanted to make it relatable so we can see how we're working as human beings. Now, why would somebody who's been sexually abused as a child then grow up as an adult to sexually abuse more children? What is it in the brain that is creating that? And we need to think about this better, because we need to really appreciate when an adult is sexually abusing a child, they're actually getting arousal out of it, right? It's not just an act. It's not like a smack or a neglect, or they're actually getting a kick out of it, and their body is reacting physically. Let's take a man who is abusing a child is getting an erection, like it's a physical response. So what is it in that is creating that when it happened to them when they were a child? It's the most devastating thing that ever happened to them. So I'm glad that me and you are having these conversations. I'm glad that I hope that it's going to start getting people questioning in their own head who are listening. These are so important. These conversations are so important.
Now, have you thought of solutions? If somebody were to say, great question, what would you do if you had all the resources in the world? What do we do? What do we need to implement in society to take care of this? And I know we're not going to have the answer right now, but have you thought about that? If that were to be the case, what do you think we need to do?
Number one thing is get every single child on this planet educated. And the levels of education will change with the age. Of course, we will talk to a 5-year-old, very different to a 13-year-old. But let's just get every single child on this planet understanding where their private area is and the rules around it. Let's just do that, right? Because you can't follow your child around 24/7. They go to friends' houses, they go to relatives' houses, they go to sports clubs where you are not there. You can't keep your eyes on them 24/7. So they need some tools, they need some knowledge, they need some understanding of what's right and wrong. Just something very simple like private areas and the rules around them. I just released a post 2 or 3 days ago that explained the concept of, we're so quick to teach children about stranger danger. Right, we're so quick. I mean, that's universal. I mean, in the Western world, that is universal. Every parent does it. You do not talk to strangers. You do not go with strangers. Why? Because they'll take you away from mummy and daddy. Now, that is a necessary conversation, and it's very important that we have it, but it's pretty scary for a child. You think a 5-year-old would be like, they just wouldn't, they get the rule, but it would freak them out a little. So with some of the responses I've heard of, oh my goodness, no, we would never talk to our 5-year-old about private parts. I don't want to ruin their innocence, or I don't want to scare them. I don't think that's a scary conversation for a child. You say to your 6-year-old, let's name that child Charlie. Charlie, these are the areas on your body that nobody is to touch. And if anybody touches you there, you just tell mummy. Is that, yeah, you get that? And also you're not to touch anybody else in those areas. It's as simple as that. It's not scary. It's nowhere near as scary as the stranger conversation, but it's the conversation always left out.
And I think too, what stranger danger leaves out is strangers are really easy for kids to pick out, but what happens when it's not a stranger? The person that abused you wasn't a stranger. This was somebody
No.
you loved to a degree. It was somebody you trusted, somebody that was in your life as I would say from the perception of it, supposed to be a positive influence, somebody that was supposed to be looking over you, somebody that your parents were trusting, right? So that also leaves out the people that are closest to them, like you said. If it's only strangers and a kid saying, well, this person's not a stranger, so I don't need to tell mom and dad about it. This is somebody that mom and dad know about. This is a friend. This is somebody I trust. So there's nothing to worry about. It's not a stranger.
Absolutely. So that's where this private area and the rules around them comes in. And I'm talking about this being implemented throughout a child's life. You know, it's not just like a one lesson thing or a one lesson at school thing. It needs to be implemented every month, one hour every month, and that the education develops as the child gets older. That's my number one solution. We just went into that in a bit of detail because I feel very passionate about it. Because if we can get the children equipped, that is such a useful and important defense mechanism against this happening. Another solution that I'm thinking about and trying to articulate properly is, what are we going to do with all the adults that do find children sexually attractive but have never acted on their tendency and never want to, or they want help so that they don't? What are we going to do with them? Because we can't just villainize them all, because we'll just push them into a corner where at some point in their life they're going to break. You know, they're not strong enough to deal with this on their own. You know, sexual temptation comes in strong, maybe they resist it. Sexual temptation comes in stronger, maybe they resist it. Sexual temptation comes in stronger and they're having a bad day, and then they're on the internet going for it. So what are we going to do with the people that identify with this problem that have never acted on it before? I don't think it's a good idea just to call them, say that we should, you know, the attitude that we've got at the moment.
What else do you think on the opposite spectrum of that? Because there's also movements trying to normalize pedophilia and have them fit into society. How do you feel about that extreme too? Because it seems like there's this total polar opposite opposing views. One is to villainize them, one is to accept them, and there's not much in between. So what are your views too on the extremism of, let's just normalize it, pedophilia should be accepted just like any LGBTQ member, and we should categorize it into a actual sexuality?
I absolutely disagree with the people that are trying to normalize pedophilia.
And tell us why.
Because when you engage in sexual activity with a child, the child is not consenting to that because they don't understand what that is. They're too young to give consent of a sexual nature. What you've actually done, if you're engaging in sexual activity with a child, is you've manipulated them, you've groomed them, you've tricked them into thinking that that's actually what they want. They're not at a level of maturity to give their consent. So it's not normal. It's not okay. If whatever kick you're getting out of that, go and find it somewhere else. You know, if it's control, if it's the breaking of something so innocent, if it's power, just go and find it somewhere else, right? Because the children don't deserve to have that on them. I disagree with the normalization of pedophilia. It's nowhere near the LGBT community. It shouldn't even be associated with that. I don't want to gain any traction at all. I really don't. I mean, the only people that are pushing at that are the people that are doing it, right? We need to let's just start investigating what human nature is. You know, human nature. And again, I'm no expert, but human nature is not to engage with children of a sexual in a sexual way. They're prepubescent. You know, their body is not even ready for that. Their hormones are not even ready for that. You know, they haven't even got the right hormones for that. So I strongly disagree.
I think that's important coming from you, because there is a lot more talk about that. And I'm starting to see an A included with the LGBTQ. They're starting.
And what does A stand for?
Age.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And I think that I'm already seeing that, and it makes me nervous too, because I'm with you. That's not something that I don't think age is a sexuality, that you're attracted to a prepubescent child. And I completely agree with you. I think that there should be boundaries on what is acceptable as far as consent. What age is that when somebody is mentally and neurologically able to consent and actually mean it, instead of just doing it because you're a child and your brain's not developed? And I think that that's a conversation too that we need to start having more also, is where's that middle ground? We have this extreme where we want to just accept it and make it a sexuality. We also have this extreme where we want to hate everybody who has this attraction, right? So where's that middle ground? And I feel like we're failing as a society to find that.
We are failing as a society. We are failing as a society. The way we are dealing with this currently is so outdated. You know, it's so old, it's so old-fashioned, it's so prehistoric, when the situation of child abuse has advanced so much and left us behind as a society. And the internet has done that, right? And the people who are involved in this activity are having a field day, you know, because nobody's looking at them, nobody's talking about them, nobody's catching them. And it's like a free-for-all. They must be laughing at us behind their computer screen. Like, them and their people, they must be laughing at us as a society, because we're scared to talk about it, we're afraid to talk about it. And we need to catch up. We need to catch up.
And the internet censors this. It's crazy. It's just the same anomaly and irony that your abuser was able to take you to court and you weren't able to take them, as it is that one of the Kardashians puts out I want to say it was a really filtered or unfiltered picture of her. I don't know, but I read that on Twitter, the day that it got out, she asked Twitter to take it down, and they took they wiped out this photo, whatever it was. But they can't stop the child porn problem on the internet, right? They can't stop that, but they want to censor people talking about it. They don't want to censor the people doing it. And that is another tremendous problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. I just recently saw a guy who's speaking out. I'll send you his Facebook page, and he had a message. He had a video taken down of him talking about how his granddad abused him because it was too explicit. And that must be very frustrating for him, but it's frustrating for all of us. You know, we're just telling our stories. They're real stories, right? They're not fiction, right? They're real life stories. We're just telling what happened, and people can't accept that it's happening. I released a very short 1-minute video some months back, probably 6 months back, that got a lot of interaction comments wise. And I said something along the lines of, I wonder what the response would be if we showed one of the many millions of child abuse videos available online. If we just picked one and shown it on national TV, I believe there would be absolute outroar. The whole world would go, you know, because we actually saw it happen, you know, but we would never do that. But not why we would do that, that's tricky. But there are millions, we know there are millions of recordings of children being abused online, but nobody's doing anything about it. And if we talk about it, like you say, we get censored.
And so it prevents the conversation from even reaching the people that don't know about it, right? And it isolates the people going through it. And these poor kids, I mean, Pornhub, right? They're getting blasted with survivors coming and saying, you monetized off my rape video, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it sends chills down my spine to even think about that. And that it's not covered on any news channel. It's not covered. No journalist is covering it, right? Our propaganda is blown up with all these other things, and there are things that aren't affecting as many people as what these children go through. And
Do you know what's so crazy? What's so crazy is sex is the most natural human instinct, or the most natural thing that we do, and it's the reason why we're all here, but nobody wants to talk about it, you know, and nobody wants to talk about the problems about it. I mean, porn is a great example of that. It's available on everybody's phone for free with no age restriction on anybody that's got a smartphone, and we're talking millions of hours of it. On whatever age you are, you've got that in your back pocket, but nobody talks about it. You know, there's no restrictions, there's nobody watching it, there's nobody monitoring what's being put on there.
yeah, where's the fact checkers on Pornhub?
Yeah, I mean,
why aren't they flagging all those videos, right? I mean, they're on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, right?
yeah.
But people like us, you know, we risk even talking about this and having this conversation completely taken down for telling the truth and actually giving a testimony, right?
Yeah.
It's absolutely, it's just insane. I think all these topics, I really pray that more people start taking these things into consideration and just thinking about it, because even if it doesn't affect you directly, it still is affecting you directly, because just like you didn't tell your story for so long, there's dozens, hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of people that we walk by in our lives every day that maybe we talk to on a daily basis that are going through this, that maybe their kids are going through this and they're unaware. Maybe it's happening in our own family somewhere and we don't know. Maybe our own children's photos that we're innocently posting on Instagram are ending up on these really explicit websites and being sold. There's so many variables that we don't know and that are out of our control. And all it takes is having these conversations and normalizing it. And so that makes me want to take the conversation with you to present time. What's next? You visited your abuser, you just got out of court, and there's been this huge buildup with that because, as you said, it's really crazy that he was able to do that with you and that you had to undergo those circumstances simply for trying to get your story out and confront somebody that hurt you. What's next for you now that this final court appearance is done?
It's really nice now to concentrate on the other areas of this project that I feel passionate about, because the court situation did take up a lot of the past couple of months, and that is educating children for prevention in the future, and also to offer other survivor support. So they're the areas that I want to focus on. Now, I am working with more artists, more illustrators, more video producers, and I've got projects coming out. Next week, if you're listening, next week I'm releasing a 5-part illustration series, and it's very different to anything else I've ever done. In fact, once that is released, possibly we should chat and possibly we could do a video discussing that. I don't want to give any more details because that's actually the most detail I've given so far. And so keep an eye out for that. Starts on Monday. I've got other projects in the pipeline, and also I'm going to start crowdfunding for these projects now. So before I actually did this full time, I was a mechanical design engineer, I mentioned, and I stopped working and I collected my savings to run this project. So now my money is starting to run low. These projects do cost money. The animation costs money. The website that's being developed costs money. The logo that I use costs money. So now what I'm looking to do is start crowdfunding for these projects. So that's what's next. That's the next step. Because what I can do is if I can try to get this thing running itself financially, then it can continue forever. At the moment, it's not sustainable. So that's my plan for the future. More content, better quality content. I want to attract more skilled people to the table, and we just keep trying to get people engaged. And one more thing is I also am now looking to try to create like a live theatre performance that explains how the life of a survivor unfolds, and possibly we could tour with it and possibly even take it into schools. Now that would be a huge thing. So all of these plans are there. I'm working hard 24/7 on this, and yeah, I really just plan to hopefully this will take off.
Amazing. Wow. I think that that's really inspiring too for survivors listening, and even people who might not have gone through what you did, but are surviving something in their life, even if it's a breakup or you lost somebody that was close to you, or you lost a job, even just with what's going on in the world. I think it's really inspiring to see people who have gone through something so traumatic. And Samantha Brown says, I had to figure out a way to use my story so my story didn't use me. And you guys are all just the examples of you guys living that, I think is really inspiring for people every day who go through struggles, and especially survivors who are really struggling, to see an example of what can happen if you just go on that path. It's going to be different for everybody how that comes out, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and we all experience things that we shouldn't have to, especially survivors. But don't ever think that there's not a way that you can't inspire somebody else or prevent it from happening from somebody else. And I want to thank you so much for living that example, and for the courage that you have, Jeremy, because it's really rare. And especially you're giving a voice to men, and men, we desperately need more men speaking up about this too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And it's so great to speak with you. The questions you've asked are so challenging, and that really tests me. That's fantastic. And for anybody that is listening, that please visit my social media, visit my YouTube, see what's going on, and come on this journey that we're all on. And let's just see if we can really try to do something productive and useful for the children and survivors.
And let people know how can people support you? Whether it is, do you have a website set up where people can come donate? Do you have social media handles? I'll link it all below, but for people who do have their pad and paper and they're taking notes right now, if you want to go ahead and let people know where they can connect with you and how they can support you, that would be awesome.
Yep, so it's Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and it's all under Jeremy Indika. The website is being developed at the moment, so it's not out yet. Keep an eye on the content. We're going to start crowdfunding, so please come and help if you feel the content is resonating or helping you. So it's all under Jeremy Indika, which you'll put the link in the description. Come join the conversation. We're really trying to elevate. That's what we're trying to elevate.
And for everybody listening, please share the heck out of this. This has nothing to do with this podcast. It's giving a voice to people who don't have a voice otherwise. It's giving a voice to children who are going through this right now. It's helping a survivor heal. It's helping another survivor who's stuck in a situation or who's looking to have the same courage that Jeremy has in his life. We need to really make these conversations normalized. And the best way to do it, even if you're nervous to go post it on social media and put stuff out for everybody, just like how Jeremy went and told a really close friend about his story, go send it to people who you trust, who will be receptive to it. Maybe they'll go send it to 5 more people after you send it to them. And that's how we get the ball rolling and the snowball growing. And we all push it together to bring voices to the voiceless and to make these really uncomfortable conversations a little bit less uncomfortable and a little more normalized. And Jeremy, is there anything else that you want people to know before we check out for today?
No, that's it. It's been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to see your videos next week. And you did promise that we do another podcast. So for those of you listening, I would love to bring Jeremy back on. We just got a commitment from him. So we'll bring him on for another episode, and we'll follow up with all the new stuff that he's creating. So you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe to the podcast if you haven't. like I said, share, 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 write us a review. It helps. And go connect with Jeremy. He's very responsive on social media. His content's awesome. He's constantly creating conversations and dialogue and everything that he posts. And I really encourage you guys to actually go support and interact with survivors, because you're helping the whole world by doing that. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. And Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good day, you guys.